everyone. This is summer break. Glad to see that some of you are here. Today is the third part and the last part in the Yoga and Science of Happiness. So the question comes, why do we experience unhappiness? A major source of our unhappiness comes from other human beings, whether those closest to us, strangers we're forced to interact with, or others we may admire, fear, or envy from afar. The big question is, why do we let other people's behavior affect us negatively? The source of our unhappiness is in how we view consciousness. There is a telling conversation Sri Ramakrishna had with M., the recorder of the Gospel of Ramakrishna, a staunch non-dualist, who later, under the influence of the master, began to broaden and deepen his spiritual views. M asked, I have come to believe what you say, that all is possible with God. It is quite possible for God to have forms. Sri Ramakrishna said, good. Remember further that as consciousness, he pervades the entire universe of the living and the non-living. M. I think of him as the consciousness and conscious beings. Sri Ramakrishna then replied, stick to that ideal now. There is no need of tearing down and changing one's attitude. You will gradually come to realize that the consciousness in conscious beings is the consciousness of God. He alone is consciousness. So if we can incorporate that truth alone, our sorrows and conflicts with others would disappear, because we equate people with their bodies and minds. We put that stamp on every interaction we have with others. When we can instead begin to superimpose the reality, which is our true nature, on the other as well, that changes the quality of our human interactions. We're no longer tempted to see them as a body and mind. Rather, we forge new synapses in our spiritual mind by remembering them as consciousness behind the mask of appearance. And that takes the long-lasting sting of ill feeling out of any negative encounter we may have with others. That is not to say that we lose our discrimination in the process. Once Yogan, the future Swami Yogananda, went to a shop to buy an iron pot. Now you all know the story. It's an old story. And he appealed to the religious feeling of the shopkeeper and did not examine the pot closely. Afterwards, he found that the pot leaked. Sri Ramakrishna scolded him. Be a devotee of God, he said, but don't be a fool. Do you think a shopkeeper opens his shop to practice religion? Why did you not examine the pot first before purchasing it? So we can all try to see this world as a divine play and beings as full of consciousness, but let's not lose our discrimination. So armed with that, viveka, we can all do this. We can step back from any interaction and remember the consciousness behind the appearance of whom we're interacting with. We can try to superimpose that on the individual we're having an interchange with. And that conscious mental act also has a hidden effect on the person with whom we're interacting with. You can experiment for yourself. Swami Brahmananda related the experience of that spiritual attainment. He once told his young monk, the future Swami Pravrajika, there are times when it becomes impossible for me to teach anyone. No matter where I look, I see only God wearing many masks. Who am I the teacher? Who is to be taught? How can God teach God. But when my mind comes down again to a lower level, I see the ignorance in man and I try to remove it. So we begin with baby steps. We can and must try to take this truth to heart. We are that divine consciousness. It inhabits us, each of us, just as it does the people and creatures we see around us. But how can we feel this? To drive this subtle truth home, in the Chandogya Upanishad, we read how Uddalaka taught his son Svetaketu the nature of divine consciousness inherent within his human form and within the form of all beings, though we as unrealized souls cannot see or feel it. Uddalaka taught by this example. He instructed, "Put this salt in water and come to me tomorrow morning." Svetaketa did as he was told, and the next morning his father asked him to bring the salt which he had put into the water, but he could not, for it had dissolved. Then said Uddalaka, "Sip the water and tell me how it tastes." "It's salty, father." "Yes, in the same way," said Uddalaka, "though you do not see Brahman in this body, he is indeed there. That which is the subtle essence in that all things have their existence, that is the self." What is the self? It is of the nature of Sat, which is the same as Chit, which is the same as Ananda, bliss absolute. We are indeed that subtle, bliss-filled consciousness that abides within each one of us. And every day when we sit for meditation, it's necessary to remind ourselves of that indwelling truth. Why? Those daily meditation sessions in turn polish our heart with that truth and bring us a deep sense of satisfaction, stability, and joy that sustains us throughout the day. Yes, it does work. We are tasting, as it were, the subtle essence of our being, just as Svetaketu tasted for himself the subtle essence of salt as he sipped the water. There's a wonderful story of a couple. One was a devotee and one was not. But the husband could always tell when the wife was not meditating because their life did not go very harmoniously. So he would always encourage her to meditate. So this just enhances that idea that yes, even though we don't feel the results necessarily, it does work. It does change us. And over time, it has a deep, deep change that takes place within us. So we take this truth with us. And as it day by day changes us internally, so does it change how we view others and this world. It's a slow process. Swami Vivekananda asserted, "The world is a grand moral gymnasium wherein we have all to take exercise so as to become stronger and stronger spiritually." So it is the gymnasium, as it were, wherein we work out this truth for ourselves, each one of us. The truth that the divine source of happiness and bliss lies within us and within each and every being with whom we come into contact. That source of happiness is there for each of us to realize and manifest. Now, how, we might ask? As Ramana Maharshi once instructed a seeker, your eyes cannot see themselves. Place a mirror before them and they see themselves. Similarly with creation, see yourself first and then see the world as the self. Very simple, very beautiful truth. Vivekananda tells us the world is neither good nor evil. It is the Lord's world. It is beyond both good and evil. perfect in itself. His will is going on, showing all these different pictures, and it will go on without beginning and without end. It is a great gymnasium in which you and I and millions of souls must come and get exercises and make ourselves strong and perfect. That is what it is for. Not that God could not make a perfect universe, he said. Not that he could not help the misery of the world. But then how then to view evil and sin, we might ask. For that, Vivekananda rejoins in no uncertain terms from the standpoint of Jnana Drishti. He experienced at the first World's Parliament of Religions when he addressed his audience, children of immortal bliss. What a sweet, what a hopeful name. Heirs of immortal bliss, yea, the Hindu refuses to call you sinners. Ye are the children of God, the sharers of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings, ye divinities on earth. It is a sin to call a man so. It is a standing libel on human nature. Imagine the impact that coming from Ishvarakoti. But then at the same time, addressing humankind's mundane mindset, he taught, come up, O lions, and shake off the delusion that you are sheep. You are souls immortal, spirits free, blessed, and eternal. You are not matter. You are not bodies. Matter is your servant, not you the servant of matter. So to attend and maintain the goal of peace of mind and true happiness, Mahatma Gandhi succinctly addressed the lens through which we can view even the evils of this world, which we must deal with, and he certainly did. He said, hate the sin, not the sinner. So our perception of the world, how we view the world, is what matters, so as not to become sullied by the evils we see. As Pravrajika Brahmaprana points out in her book, Science of Happiness, everything is a manifestation of consciousness, yet everything manifests that consciousness differently. So no matter who we or what we are dealing with, we can step back and try to superimpose that philosophical ideal upon that with which we are dealing. When we can integrate that understanding within ourselves, then we can move freely about in this world, untainted by what we might see, and free from attachment or dislike. Striving for that even-mindedness is the groundwork for true happiness. It is our perception that must change, and that gradually takes place with spiritual practice, striving toward the goal of God realization, and at the same time, deepening our self-awareness. The two go together. So what does that penultimate spiritual perception look like? From the standpoint of jnana, the world is unreal. Sri Ramakrishna said all these names and forms are illusory, like a dream. Or from the standpoint of vijnana, the world appears as a manifestation of the Divine Mother. For example, when Sri Ramakrishna was the Kali temple priest, he revealed, the Divine Mother revealed to me in the Kali temple that it was she who had become everything. She showed me that everything was full of consciousness. The image was consciousness. The altar was consciousness. The water vessels were consciousness. The door sill was consciousness. The marble floor was consciousness. All was consciousness. He said, I found everything inside the room soaked, as it were, in bliss, the bliss of God. I saw a wicked man in front of the Kali temple. But in him also I saw the power of the Divine Mother vibrating. That was why I fed a cat with the food that was offered to the Divine Mother. I clearly perceived that all this was the Divine Mother, even the cat. The Jnani who has reached the goal is at complete peace, the peace that passeth all understandings, as we can read in the Philippians 4:7. The bhakta is immersed in bliss, and the yogi transcends the opposites of life and grows in equanimity and calmness of mind. Peace, bliss, and calmness, perfect calmness, result in a heightened sense of mindfulness and level of perception, a luminosity of mind, spiritual insight into one's own and others' states of mind. For example, when Swami Premananda reported to Swami Brahmananda that a millionaire whose wife had just died decided to renounce the world and give his fortune to the Ramakrishna mission, Swami Brahmananda intervened. Brother, he said, a worldly man who associates with a holy man like yourself naturally becomes inspired by the ideal of renunciation. Shall we in turn become worldly because we have met a worldly man? Swami Brahmananda had intuited that the donor would later regret his offer being attached to his wealth. That comes from spiritual insight. So how can then we become so self-aware? The key region of the brain for self-awareness is the insula, deep within the cerebral cortex, the brain's monitoring system. It receives signals from the visceral organs. It perceives internal sensations and feelings, heightened instinct, awareness of physical sensations. A high level of activity in the insula means a high level of self-awareness. To the yogi, self-awareness is mindfulness. Dr. Dan Siegel, whose work on interpersonal neurobiology to enhance mental health, relationships, and mindful awareness, calls it mind sight. Siegel informs us that focused attention allows us to see the internal workings of our own minds, a spiritual trait that we find in Buddhism and Yoga Vedanta, to be aware of our mental processes without being swept away by them, to opt out of ingrained habits, to know the difference between I am sad, a limiting self-definition, and I feel sad, is the ability to recognize feeling without being consumed by it. It allows us to reshape and redirect our inner experiences, expand our choices in life. How sophisticated is this quality? We find in the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient scripture. In chapter 2, verse 70, Sri Krishna described this quality in the Sage of Steady Wisdom. He said, water flows continually into the ocean, but the ocean is never disturbed. Desire flows into the mind of the seer, but he is never disturbed. The seer knows peace. The man who stirs up his own lusts can never know peace. Now, a bird's eye view of this quality is described by Swami Sardananda, who was one day asked by a young monk, when any passion that gets hold of me, it destroys me if an urge of anger comes to me. Does that happen to you? Swami Sardananda described his own experience in detail. He said, yes, that can happen. But the difference between you and me lies here. I am sitting here, and deep within my psyche, a small speck of a dark cloud is forming. Slowly, it is growing in dimension, and from the depth, it's coming to the surface. I watch it grow in dimension and rise to the surface mind. And it wants to prod me as it does to you. But I watch as an eternal witness, an observer. It comes and wants to prod me, but it passes over. And I remain as I am. So you must also develop this capacity. This degree of self-awareness is also foundational to the high degree of happiness we're seeking. This self-awareness can be consciously developed as a yoga practice. How? Vivekananda the Guru instructed how in his Raja Yoga classes given in the West. He performed a pratyahara. Now, pratyahara is one of the 8 limbs of yoga and a precursor to dharana, concentration, and dhyana, meditation, which systematically follow over time and with practice. It's only a 3 to 5 minute practice. And we too can take Swami Vivekananda's calming the lake of the mind pratyahara, this ancient Sankhya Vedanta mindfulness meditation, and discover for ourselves its value. If we sit still and straight with eyes closed and let the mind drift, we picture the mind as a calm lake stretched before us. And Vivekananda tells us, see how thoughts come and go as bubbles rising and breaking on the surface, becoming ripples that are ever widening circles. He then says, make no effort to control your thoughts, but watch them, follow them in imagination as they rise, break, and float away. He then says, watch the mind as a thing entirely apart from yourself. I am not the mind. I see that I am thinking. I am watching my mind act. Hold fast to the idea, he says. I am the witness, watching my mind drift. The mind is not I. And he ends with, be the witness. So if we practice this, before we begin our meditation, what do we learn from this practice? First, it helps to calm and center ourselves. There's no doubt about it. Second, it's a useful practice to later analyze and deconstruct our mind, what's actually going on in our mind. And then we ask the question, am I the mind? Well, science tells us that anything that can be observed, in this case, our thoughts, is matter. So then we realize that mind is subtle matter. That's all. It's a radical truth. Therefore, we have a mind, but we are not the mind. And with practice, we begin to observe the subconscious mind, our hidden thoughts, our emotions, our memories, some scars that are actually fueling our actions. Then we learn how to target and attenuate those obstacles through specific yoga practices, such as counter thoughts, the practice of dispassion, and renunciation. We become the master. Through mindfulness meditation, we learn to refer to our higher mind, the buddhi, that part of the mind which is watching the lower mind, and that part of the mind which points to the witness consciousness. And with practice, we're able to periodically reposition ourselves in that attitude throughout the day. We can even do this when we're interacting with people around us. And as we advance further, we begin to experience the awareness of our awareness, our essential being from which our thoughts rise and fall, the unseen seer, the witness consciousness. So ultimately, yoga means complete union. Subject and object become one. Alongside this practice, you can also systematically try to develop jnana drishti as we patiently and persistently strive with penetrative insight and discrimination to pierce the reality that lies beneath this superficial flesh and bones world of Maya. Along with mindfulness is a trait we can develop that enables us to be context sensitive. Emotional spontaneity is related to the hippocampus, which processes memories. Context sensitive means to have appropriate responses to various situations, threatening and non-threatening. PTSD is associated with a loss of volume in the hippocampus and less strength in neural connections between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. A war vet is more likely to have diminished hippocampus. For example, it would conflate the dangers in Syria's streets with, say, the safety in Iowa's streets. Now, when I was a younger nun, I worked with war vets and had very interesting dialogue with them and with those who were helping them overcome this PTSD. So it is something that really, it does work, this understanding. So for the yogi and the Vedantin, the ability to remain mindful under all circumstances is very important. The wiring between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex supersedes the norm. It means unflappability in sometimes dangerous situations, because such a soul is established in extreme self-awareness or in the witness consciousness. For example, Swami Sardananda exhibited absolute calmness when traveling in a boat. He was smoking a hookah when a storm arose, and the boatman ran from side to side, and a nearby devotee in the boat became frantic. But the Swami remained undisturbed. The devotee was so distraught. How can you smoke at this time? And he grabbed the Swami's hookah and threw it into the Ganges. The storm eventually subsided and the boat reached the shore. Greeting party members saw the hookah pipe stem in the Swami's hand. What happened? They asked. Ask your friend, Swami Sardananda explained. Swami Vivekananda said about Swami Sardananda, your blood is just like that of a fish. It doesn't boil. So to quickly recap, the major points in establishing ourselves in true happiness are: try to instill and retain the vision of Vedanta in how we view ourselves and others as inhabiting the one undivided consciousness of God. Now, it helps if both partners, husband and wife, are Vedantins. But even if your husband or wife are not, this is something that is even more challenging, but it does work if it's practiced. Though hidden, it is present just as sure as the salty water Svetaketu tasted, though the salt itself was hidden from view. Armed with Vivekananda, our faith can and does remain steadfast. We know that truth does exist beyond this vyavaharika, this empirical reality, which we experience in our everyday life. Daily, we reinstill this truth of our original nature, as well as the true nature of all beings and creatures through meditation, worship, and our prayers. We strive daily to change our misperceptions of ourselves and the world around us whenever we find ourselves misled. And we seek to grow in calmness and equanimity of mind. So this last, a mindfulness practice, that grows into equanimity of mind. What does that perception ultimately look like? Well, let's take a look. When we try to mentally cover everything and everyone with God, Brahman, the face of the Divine Mother, Sri Ramakrishna's face, whatever our conception of God, we are striving toward that goal of experiencing the unity of existence. How? When we actively do so, who is there to fear whom? All is God. Sarada Devi, Holy Mother, goes straight to the heart of the matter when she gave her final message to the world. She said, I tell you one thing, if you want peace of mind, do not find fault with others. Rather see your own faults. Learn to make the whole world your own. No one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your own. Perhaps one of the best commentaries on Mother's last instructions, to not find fault with others, but learn to make the whole world our own, is found in the Gita. Again, the second chapter, which happens to be my favorite chapter of the Gita, verse 15. Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, a serene spirit accepts pleasure and pain with an even mind and is unmoved by either. He alone is worthy of immortality. To remain unruffled by externals means that there is no contact of the senses with sense objects. The mind remains calm and therefore luminous. With this luminosity and expansiveness of the mind, one experiences oneness with all beings. Swami Vijnananda explains how equanimity of mind leads to self-mastery and the experience of oneness. He said, when you are the complete master of your mind, you can shape it as you like. When the mind is completely under your control, it will have nothing to exist on except noble thoughts. Your responsibility ends there. The rest is God's business. Vivekananda leads us to the pinnacle of what God's business is: perfect equanimity, seeing the whole world as our own. He said, he whom you are worshiping as unknown and are seeking for throughout the universe has been with you all the time. You are living through him, and he is the eternal witness of the universe. He whom all the Vedas worship, nay more, he who is always present in the eternal I, he existing, the whole universe exists. He is the light and life of the universe. Vivekananda continues, if the I were not in you, by the I he means the supreme I, you would not see the sun. Everything would be a dark mass. He shining, you see the world. Sri Ramakrishna explains the feeling of oneness one attains. He said, after realizing God, one sees that it is God himself who has become the universe and all living beings. What we want is right within us. Real happiness and joy arise within us, no matter what the outer circumstances are. So this sense of expansiveness, this making the whole world our own, is an internal experience that diminishes and transcends our concept of space or what is spacious in the physical world. After all, Holy Mother did not live in a palace. She lived in the Nahabat at Dakshineshwar. Her tiny octagonal room was only 7 feet by 9 inches square, its ceiling 9 feet by 3 inches tall, and its door only 4 feet 2 inches in height and only 2 feet 2 inches wide. Lakshmi Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's niece, described the cramped quarters. How we managed in that tiny room of the Nahabat, I sometimes wonder. It was the divine play of the master. Usually it was shared by the Holy Mother, another girl, and myself, and sometimes Golapma, who was a large woman, or other women devotees from Calcutta would stay with us. Sarada Devi's experience of spaciousness took place within herself. From out of her experience of oneness came her penultimate prescription for happiness. To shun unhappiness and advance towards happiness, the prescription is not to focus on the faults of others and within the mundane world around us, but rather we learn to develop and control our own mind so we can expand our mind beyond pettiness, smallness, negativity, and the confines of this physical world. When the flow of the mind is inward and upward, it then becomes even-minded and thus empowered and immune from the outer stresses of ordinary life. It is able to overpower the cortisol levels of stress in the brain. How? We begin to control the brain through the mind by consciously regulating our thoughts and emotions. By daily, in our meditation sittings, replacing negative samskaras with positive and elevated thoughts. This is what the war vets did in their therapy. Our process of change becomes organic and foundational. Through also karma yoga, by mentally countering negative impulses with positive thoughts, our physical selfless actions become an even more pronounced and concrete impression on the mind. By selfless service, we surrender our actions to our beloved by trying to feel we are not the doer, but are instead the witness of all actions. And we begin to distance ourselves from the ego in the process. A number of things happen. First, by bringing our chosen ideal or witness consciousness to the forefront, we are stepping back from the lower self when we try to merge, however briefly or rudimentally, with our higher self. Those moments bring stability and joy into our day, however brief. By routinely engaging in this process, we gradually become more empowered to bear and forbear. We develop the wisdom and detachment to know we cannot change the world and others. We can only strive to elevate ourselves enough to change ourselves in order to spiritually advance and retain the inner joy that process brings to us. By doing so, we develop a calm and detached witness perspective, which is able to further analyze the foibles and faults of our lower self and its flawed perceptions and root them out. And this is what it's all about, changing ourselves. And thus purified and empowered, we begin to distance ourselves from our lower self more and more and realign ourselves with the higher self. In the process, we're able to see more clearly into our own mind and the mental habits that unknowingly have undermined our own happiness. This is yoga psychology. Swami Ramakrishnananda explained the bravery of this inner work. One standing on the sea level looks at another climbing the Himalayas on a pilgrimage to Kedarnath and Badrinath. The pilgrim shall have to face the ups and downs in this sacred march on the mountains. His apparent descents do not retard his progress, but bring him only nearer to higher essence till the destination is reached. On that account, the onlooker from the plains should not judge him in bad light and think low of him. So in this process of self-development, our capacity to work increases 100-fold. Swami Akhandananda explained, he who meditates well has the power to work more efficiently. He is never tired because his energy is not misspent in any way. He is never annoyed nor worried. He is not attached to anything. So we become the creator of our own spiritual destiny. Vivekananda sums it all up. Therefore, blame none for your own faults, he said. Stand upon your own feet and take the whole responsibility upon yourselves. Say, this misery that I am suffering is of my own doing, and that very thing proves that it will have to be undone by me alone. That which I created, I can demolish. That which is created by someone else, I shall never be able to destroy. Therefore, stand up, be bold, be strong. Take the whole responsibility on your own shoulders and know that you are the creator of your own destiny. All the strength and succor you want is within yourselves. Therefore, make your own future. Peace, peace, peace.